Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu sallam wa barak ala al-mab'uthi rahmatan lil-alameen, nabiyina wa imamina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi amma ba'd. We will begin bi'idhnillah azza wa jalla and our brief study and commentary on the magnificent book entitled Ad-Durar al-Bahiyyah fi al-Masail al-Fiqhiyya. Ad-Durar al-Bahiyyah fi al-Masail al-Fiqhiyya of the great scholar and Imam, the Mujtahid of the 13th century, Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Muhammad ash-Shaukani rahimahullah. Imam Shaukani, who died in the year 1250 of the Hijrah, who was well known and respected to be of those ulama who are considered to be mujaddideen, those who revived the concept of adhering and sticking to the kitab and the sunnah and doing away with any opinion or view that went against that which was clearly proven by the kitab and the sunnah. So ash-Shaukani rahimahullah, he lived his life through many stages, growing up studying some of the madhabs that were widespread and prevalent of his time and of his area in Yemen, the country of Yemen. And then he went through stages of learning and reaching the level of al-ijtihad. And the reason why we're mentioning this here in this brief, simple lesson is because the book that we're going to study is considered to be a result of a very long life, a life full of study, a life full of reflection, full of him contemplating and pondering on what he read, what he studied, and what the other scholars of Islam said. And he brought together and summarized, and as if he squeezed everything out of that long, toilsome, burdensome life into this small, simple, basic metin. Okay, so he made the metin as a book that is summarized, mukhtasar, okay, for a beginner, simple, clean, to the point pieces of information. And we explained in the first of our lessons on the Baykuniya poem that the beginner is to start off his studies like this. He isn't to start with khilaf. He isn't to start off with different opinions and different views, 3 or 4 different evidences. He's not to start off with controversial, provocative type of topics and things like this. And this is very widespread where we come from in the United States, in the United Kingdom. Is very prevalent. You find a person who's a Muslim yesterday, or non-Muslim yesterday, accepts Islam, and he's talking about, oh, this is difference of opinion, and this opinion is weak, and this is batil, and this it doesn't work like that. As Imam Ad-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala said about one of the junior students of Hadith that wished to butt heads with some of the experienced Hadith masters, he says, "Yurid an yatir wa lam yurayish." He says, this man, he wants to fly, but his feathers aren't long enough yet. He just came out of the nest yesterday. Okay, you have bushy feathers, and you want to soar in the sky with a hawk or falcon that's been living for years. It doesn't work like that. So the beginner is to take small, simple, baby steps that are clear, without any confusion, without any type of intricacies or anything that's going to take away from getting done. And this is the main or the successful way of studying in any science, let alone fiqh. When you study fiqh, the beginning should be to just cover the basic issues, to cover the mas'ala, that you've heard something about it. You know what to do in general, in brief. And then you move on to another book, and you study the proofs and evidences. Then you move on to another book, and you study the different opinions within that one school of thought or that one method of teaching. And then you move on to a third book in which you go outside of the box, quote unquote, until years of study, years of reading, years of memorization, years of tutelage at the feet of your teachers and your people who educate you, the ulama and the mashayikh, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal, and then you reach the level of ijtihad, when you can discern yourself and decipher what's correct and why, what is incorrect and why. As for to start off with 2 or 3 opinions, to start off with controversy, then that is going to be chaotic. And we mentioned this before, how years will pass out of your life and you'll find that you don't have no knowledge. And you find that the barakah has been stripped from you because you weren't fed and you weren't nurtured the proper way. The proper way. So, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal, in these lessons on fiqh, we want to keep things basic. We want to avoid mentioning khilaf as much as possible. And we also want to avoid mentioning proofs and evidences. We want to just cover what the author says, understand his speech, and move on, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal. This may seem strange. This may seem weird or peculiar to one of you. What do you mean you're not going to mention the proofs and evidences? What do you mean you're not going to? Yes, that's what we're going to do here. We have durus on hadith. We have durus in which we explain hadith. We have durus question and answers, things like this, that's a different issue. But in our formal study of fiqh, this is how we want to study it. So, gentlemen, explained this previously before. Khairan, inshallah. Another introduction is the concept of studying fiqh and why it is so important. The Messenger of Allah has told us in the well-known hadith narrated by Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan radiallahu anhu in al-Bukhari and Muslim, when Muawiyah was the Khalifa, the leader of the Muslims, and he was upon the minbar of the Rasul and he told them several things. And from the things that he told them, that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fi ad-din, wa innama ana qasimun wallahu yu'ti." Okay, man qala alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, whoever Allah wants good for, He gives them fiqh in the religion. And Allah Azza wa Jalla is the one who actually endows knowledge. All I do is pass out and disperse what Allah gives and blesses the slave with. So in this authentic hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, it clearly proves that those who do not learn fiqh, those who do not study fiqh, those who don't have understanding of the deen, as if Allah didn't want good for them. Wal-iyadhu billah. And this means that Allah didn't want to give them the total amount of goodness. Allah did not want to give them the khairiyyat tamma, the complete, thorough blessing of knowledge. Okay? So therefore, when a person studies fiqh and he studies his deen, this should be a means of glad tidings, as we mentioned in the first chapter of the 40 hadith on seeking knowledge. Seeking knowledge is a means of bushra, glad tidings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let alone, how do you pray? How do you fast? Okay, how do you pay zakah? How do you make hajj and umrah? How do you marry? When a person is afflicted with divorce, how do you divorce? How do you buy and sell? Where can you live? How can you live? What can you make for a living? You can't successfully do these things unless you have fiqh, unless you have knowledge of the deen, unless you have knowledge of the deen. So therefore, fiqh is something that is very important with regards to prayer, with regards to purification, with regards to a woman's hijab, with regards to the rights of a wife that she has over her husband, and the list goes on. Every single Muslim needs fiqh. He needs no basic fiqh. Every Muslim doesn't have to be a scholar of fiqh. Every Muslim doesn't have to be a student of knowledge of fiqh, but every Muslim must know the basics, must know the simple A, B's, and C's. And if something comes up or problem arises that takes you outside of those A, B's, and C's, then it's your responsibility to ask those who know, as Allah said in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And Allah also says, الرَّحْمَنُ فَاسْأَلْ بِهِ خَبِيرًا. Ask those who don't know. Ask them about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask them about the bayyinat and the zubur. Ask them about the scriptures. Ask them about the deen. So therefore, this is a very simple, humble introduction with regards to the importance of fiqh. The next introduction is the different schools and methods of fiqh. Every Muslim who's been Muslim for some time and has some type of awareness, Islamic awareness, he hears of different schools of thoughts. This is a Hanafi school of thought. This is a Maliki school of thought. This is a Shafi'i school of thought. This is the Hanbali school of thought. This is the Ahl al-Hadith opinion. This is the Zahiri opinion, so on and so forth. Or people hear fatwa. The Sheikh gave a fatwa. This Sheikh gave a fatwa. What do these terms mean? Our lesson right now is not on the evolution of fiqh, nor is it on the history of these different madhabs or schools of thoughts. We've explained this in detail in several other classes, and there are other books that you can find on the topic. But in general, there are several ways of studying fiqh. We have fiqh that is based off of a madhab, one set of rules or opinions that are compiled and put together and organized topically. We have method and comparative fiqh, in which we take an issue and then we look into what the ulama say collectively and try to determine what's correct. We have that which is called fiqh sunnah, in which we take the hadith of the Prophet directly and then extract and deduce from it and come up with rulings from it. There are different ways of studying fiqh. What we want to do now is we want to read the book of al-Shaukani, understand his words, take the basic simple step one by one, and then move on and progress and mature, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we've done many lessons on YouTube with regards to fiqh sunnah and with regards to comparative fiqh. So please go back to those channels and those introductions that we mentioned there. Now we want to keep things as brief as possible. Bi'idhnillahi azza wa jal. The author, he says, Kitab al-Taharati Babul Miyah. And I said, once again, it's a humble introduction, but the concept of fiqh, the proper way of studying it, the history of it, is something that needs to be discussed in several lectures. Khair, inshallah. The author says, Kitab al-Taharati Babul Miyah. He says, the book of Tahara. Babul Miyah. In brief, al-Tahara means cleanliness. Okay, it means something to be clean. And it doesn't necessarily mean purification. It can mean purification, but it doesn't necessarily mean purification. Purification is an act of doing something, purifying something. But it means like purity, for something to be clean and pure. Okay? And it also has a transitive meaning to purify something or to clean something else. Okay? But the origin of the word, of the term, is something that is pure and something that is clean. And at-tahara has several meanings and has several types. From the types of tahara, which is the most important type of tahara, is the tahara of the soul. Is the tahara of one's heart. The purity of one's insides, quote unquote. And that is being void from shirk. And void from loving other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And being connected to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jealousy, envy, malice, hatred, greed. All of these things are considered to be means of filth. Okay? And spiritual vices that the Muslim must strive to rid himself of. Okay, hating the Muslims, harboring malice against them is not tahara. You don't have a pure soul if you're jealous against your brother, or if you have envy against your sister in Islam. Okay, if you're not pleased with what Allah gave you from the dunya, then you need to study tahara, and not tahara of salat and fiqh, and you need to study tahara of the soul. You need to read the Quran and purify your soul. And then we have physical tahara, wudu, making ghusl, tayammum. Okay, these are all types of tahara. Khair, inshallah. He says here, the chapter of al-miyah, of types of water. The chapter of types of water. Why does he start off with the chapter of types of water? What is the hikmah behind this? Why didn't he start off talking about the salah? The second pillar of Islam is the salah. Bunyana Islam ala khams. And the salah is number 2. This is because prayer is not accepted unless a person has tahara. As the Messenger of Allah explained to us in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu in Sahih Muslim, لا يقبل الله صلاة بغير طهور. Allah does not accept a prayer unless it has purity, tahara. If you're not in a pure state, your prayer is invalid. It's null and void. So therefore, before you study salah, you must study the tahara. A person may say, well, ya akhi, I've been Muslim for years. I've been Muslim my whole life. My whole family is Muslim. My grandfather is Muslim. I come from a lineage of Muslims. Why are you telling me about this? And that is because just because you've been Muslim your whole life, or because you've been Muslim for 40 years, doesn't mean that you've been doing it correctly for 40 years. Doesn't mean that. You've been praying for 40 years, but has it been correct? According to the sunnah of Muhammad ﷺ? You've been making wudu your whole life. Your grandfather is a sheikh from your tribe. Does that mean he had knowledge of the deen? Knowledge of the kitab and the sunnah? Doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean that, okay? And a true student of knowledge will never scorn information and never scorn benefit, no matter where it comes from, no matter who he gets it from. A true student of knowledge. Khayr, inshallah. No more. Let's move on. The author, he says, Al-ma'u tahirun mutahirun. لا يخرجه عن الوصفين إلا ما غير ريحه أو لونه أو طعمه من النجاسات. He says that water is pure in itself and it has the agent of purification. Water is clean and it cleanses other things. لا يخرجه, nothing takes water from these two qualities. What are those two qualities? Being pure and purifying other things. Nothing can make water impure. Nothing or nobody can come and say you can't make wudu with this water. You can't make ghusl with this water unless one of the 3 qualities of the water has been altered by something that is impure. He says if the smell of the water has been altered, its color or its taste by something which is najis, then the water is no longer upon those 2 qualities. Once again, it's very important to understand this systematically. Water remains to be pure in itself. It purifies other things as long as nothing changes its original qualities from impure things. We understand from this is that if some impurities fell into water and those impurities did not alter the taste or the color, the smell of the water, then the water remains pure. Or if something changed the color of the water or the smell of the water or the taste of the water and that substance itself was not najis, then the water also remains with those 2 qualities. Okay? And we're going to explain here then what is something that is najis or what is najasa. He then says, وَعَنِ الثَّانِ مَا أَخْرَجُ عَنِ اسْمِ الْمَاءِ الْمُطْلَقِ مِنَ الْمُغَيِّرَاتِ الطَّاهِرَةِ. He says, in that which takes it from its second quality, meaning that the first quality remains. The water is still clean itself. And what's meant by that is you can touch the water. You can drink the water. Okay? It can fall upon you. You can pray on a surface which the water spilled. But the water cannot remove ritual impurity, which we'll get into, hadith. You can't make wudu with this type of water. You can't make ghusl with this type of water. And that is because something clean or something pure changed its qualities. In other words, we have a bottle of water, okay? The water is clean. It's upon the two qualities that the author mentioned. I put a tea bag inside of the water. I let the tea bag sit in the water for 10 seconds. I remove the tea bag. Now the water is what? It's brown. And then I put a little lemon in the water. And I put some sugar in the water, or honey in the water, or agave, or whatever you use to sweeten your tea. Okay? Now, what happens to this cup now? Is it impure? Is it najis? If it's spilt on my thobe, do I have to wash my thobe? Can I offer salat with this being spilt on my clothes? We say yes, it's still pure, but can I make wudu with it? I can't make wudu with it. Why not? Is the water najis? No, but we say that it's taken, these qualities they've altered the taste of the water. The water doesn't taste like water anymore. Water doesn't have a specific taste. Now it tastes like something. It has a fragrance. There's an aroma to it now. It has a taste. It's sweet now. It's bitter now. We say that it is no longer considered to be water, mutlaq. It's not absolute water anymore. Rather, it has a new name, and that name is tea. It's not a cup of tea. It's not water anymore. But the tea is still tahir. It's still pure. It's still a clean substance. But it's no longer contains the ability to uplift ritual impurity. You can't make wudu with tea. You can't make ghusl with tea anymore. You understand? But it's still in itself tahir. So a tea bag or tea, loose tea, whatever type of tea you use, is it tahir? It's tahir. It's pure. Sugar, pure or impure? It's pure. Okay, lemon is pure. But it clearly changed one, if not all three, of the characteristics of the water. The water is no longer transparent. The water doesn't have a basic, simple taste to it. It doesn't smell like, fresh, clean water. It smells like tea. So it's no longer considered or called water. Everybody understand this example? Or let's say lemonade. You put a lemon inside of water and you mix it around. You put some sugar in it. It's no longer considered water. It's now considered to be lemonade. Even though it's still clean, it's still pure. واضح إن شاء الله. The author, he then says, ولا فرق بين قليل وكثير وما فوق القلتين وما دونهما